you been up to this morning? I hope you've maybe been making breakfast or at least a cup of tea for somebody very special in your life. Or maybe you've made a card, or maybe you've picked some flowers, or maybe you've bought a little present, or maybe you've made a little present. Who would the special person be? Of course, it's your mother, it's your mum, isn't it? Because today is Mother's Day. Now, I thought before I told you a story from the Bible about mothers, let's see if I was to ask you to come up with a word to describe your mother, first of all using the letter M. What would you come up with? I came up with marvellous. What about the letter O? I came up with organised, because all mums have to be organised, and all mums organise you, don't they? It's your mum who says, okay, it's time to get up. It's your mum who organises where your clothes are. It's your mum who probably organises the washing, all those sort of things, organises what you're going to have for tea, sends in your notes to school. Lots of things that mums do organising with, isn't there? Tea, I put in terrific, because mums mostly are terrific, aren't they? Sometimes you might feel a bit fed up with them, but they're still being terrific underneath all that. H, I came up with helpful. Now, I don't know if you've been doing here's another H, homeschooling, but I'm sure your mum and your dad have been helping with the homeschooling, and your mum's been very helpful with that. And I'm sure it's quite difficult sometimes. Then E, I came up with encouraging, because your mum can be really encouraging. Maybe sometimes when you're feeling a bit low or you feel as if your friends have fallen out with you, it's your mum who encourages you about things and says, go on, it'll get better. And then R is reliable. Your mum is someone you can rely on. When something happens and you really want to tell somebody about it, somebody that you can trust, pretty much your mum is someone you can always rely on to be there and to listen. So that's what I came up with for mother. I came up with marvellous, organised, terrific, helpful, encouraging, reliable mum. And today is a special day when you can say thank you to her in whatever way you think's best. Probably more than anything, your mum would just love a great big hug, because that is so special. In fact, maybe that's what I could have had for the H in mother. I could have had huggy, because I think a lot of mums are huggy, aren't they? But that sort of made me think there are a lot of mums today who can't be with their children, just because we're living in these strange times where people aren't always able to see their family. There are maybe a lot of mums who aren't getting a hug, because we're not getting to hug a lot of people just now, are we? And maybe you know somebody round about near you who is a mum or a grandmum, or let's be honest, had a mum, and they're maybe a bit lonely. Maybe you could make a card for them today and just leave it on their doorstep. Have a think about that one. And then I'll tell you a story from the Bible about someone who wasn't quite a mother to the other person in the story, but it was the sort of relationship that was like being a mum. You ready for the story? So, today's story is about a family. The husband was called Elimelech, and the wife was called Naomi, and they had 2 sons. Now, at the beginning of this story, they lived round about Bethlehem, but they didn't stay there for this story. They didn't stay there at all. And the reason they had to move was because there was a famine where they lived. And so they had to move to where they could find some food and another job. Now, they moved not just away from Bethlehem, But they moved away from all the people that they lived near who all believed in God and worshipped God. And they moved to another country called Moab, where people didn't worship God. But times were so desperate that they moved anyway. So the four of them moved to Moab and they settled down, and the two boys grew up and got married. And they got married to two women who came from Moab. So there we are, lovely family now of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Started off with 4, now there's 6. But unfortunately, they went down to 5. And the reason why they went down to 5 is because Naomi's husband died, which is very sad. But Naomi was very grateful because she still had her 2 sons and her 2 daughters-in-law. But then the family went down to 3. And what happened was both of Naomi's sons died. So Naomi was left by herself with 2 daughters-in-law, the 2 wives of her 2 sons. And Naomi knew that because she was all by herself, she had no husband, life was going to be very, very difficult for her. And so she thought, I can't stay in Moab anymore. I have to go back to my people where I used to live. So she told her 2 daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth, that she was going back home. And the 2 daughters-in-law said, well, we'll come with you. Now Naomi knew that life was going to be very hard. Even when she went back to the people that she knew, she was still going to be very poor because she didn't have anybody in those days to look after her. So she said, no, don't come with me. What you 2 should do is you should go back to your families. They'll take care of you, and maybe you'll even find somebody else to look after you. Maybe you'll fall in love again. And Orpah and Ruth walked with Naomi, still talking about coming with her. But when they got to the little border where Moab ended and the countryside that Naomi was going home to started, Naomi said, no, really, you have to stop here. Go back to your families. And Orpah realized that that probably was the safest and best thing to do. And although she loved Naomi very, very much, she said, no, I will go back to my family. And she hugged Naomi and she turned round and off she went back to her family in Moab. But Ruth said, don't make me leave you. Don't say I have to go back, because I'm not going. Wherever you go, I will go. And I will worship the God that you worship. So it makes me think that all the time that Naomi was in Moab, she had gone on worshipping God, and she had gone on showing Ruth and Orpah what her God was like. Because Ruth wanted to believe in Naomi's God, and she wanted to care for Naomi. And so Naomi said, well, my life is very sad and very bitter now, but if you want to come and share my bitter life, you can come with me back to Bethlehem. And Ruth said, I do, and I will. And she followed Naomi, and they walked the long, long way back to Bethlehem. And I think Naomi was probably not a young person anymore, and so she was probably very grateful for Ruth's help. But when Naomi got back to her village, everyone said, oh, look, it's Naomi. And Naomi said, don't call me Naomi anymore, because life has been so hard for me. I want you to call me by another name, and it means bitter. And that would be a very sad way to leave Naomi, if she was there by herself with Ruth, feeling bitter and unloved and small. But God had a great plan for Naomi, and he used Ruth for the plan. You see, Ruth decided that she would have to get a job. And what she did was she went out into the fields And round the edges of the fields, she picked up little bits of corn. She became a person who's called a gleaner, which means she could just pick up edges of things. And she did that. And she was noticed by someone in the fields, and someone said, "Who is that woman?" And to cut a long story short, Ruth had been noticed by a very important owner of the field called Boaz. And after a while, Boaz married Ruth, and Ruth was able to take care of Naomi. So isn't it funny that it started off that Ruth was having to go with Naomi to a place where she wouldn't be important or known about at all, but she was willing to go with Naomi just the same. And in the end, Ruth was able to take care of Naomi and become someone very special in the story of the Bible. So God had a plan for Naomi and a plan for Ruth, but it all depended on Ruth loving Naomi and being willing to change the way she thought and change the way she worshipped and to care for someone else who wasn't quite her mother, but that she could love and look after. And that's a thing to think about for Mother's Day. There are lots of women who would love someone to look after them or to make them feel special. Just like I said earlier, they may be missing their children or they may not ever have had children. But you can do something. You can make them feel loved. You can make them feel special. On this Mother's Day, why not try and make some special thing for someone else that you know who might be a mother, who might never have been a mother, but who certainly had a mother. Think about that one, and I'll see you next week.